Hello, my name is Hakon, and today I'm doing something different on the Zoia. If you've watched my last few videos, which I know many of you have, they've all been to do with how to make the Empress Effects Zoia sequencer work more or less like a normal sequencer, with lots of flexibility in how you use it for performance and ways you can use it on the fly as well while performing more easily. Today I've chosen to do something different. Yesterday I was starting to work on a video I have planned for the Zoia about how binary logic gates work, which can be a little bit boring, to be honest. But at the end of the evening I thought, wouldn't it be fun to see if I can make the Zoia count to 100? Or display numbers from 0 to 99 on the display. So what I've done is I have created a patch that takes a value input, and now it's 0, and as the value goes up it starts counting. So 0.21 on the value becomes 21 on the screen, etc, etc, all the way up to 99. Of course it doesn't have to take a manual input like this now. Of course you can control it with something else. And of course the numbers are a bit squeezed together now because I wanted to keep the control module here on the same page. Normally I would take this module here and put it on a different page, and then I would move these pixels here 1 pixel to the left and it would look nicer. By the way, I should save it now just in case, because I did try to make this video earlier, but it turned out I'd forgotten to save my patch and I had to make it again. So this can count up to 99. So it's a nice way to, and a fun way to display the value of a CV input on the screen, which can be useful. I mean, I think of it as fun now, but of course it can have practical uses as well. Now, of course, you can just give it to an LFO here so it can take over. Okay, so now the LFO is counting all on its own. And this can be connected to any value between 0 and 1. It will work. I think if you give it a negative value, it will. I'm not sure what will happen. I haven't tried that yet. Anyway, this is not a very complicated patch, but at the same time, it's not the easiest one to explain, I've found. But I will try anyway. So, yes. I'll just... Okay, so these... first of all, the display here, each of these is its own pixel module. And so a pixel has to be connected to, if it's connected to a value of 1, it gets the maximum brightness and it's lit up. And these pixels get a value of 1 from, each number, each digit, so the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, etc. has its own. So these are the values that are connected to the display. So it's 0. There's no 0, of course, for the tens. I just left that out. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then it's for the ones digits. It's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And these take their input from, and I'll show you the heart of the operation, which are these 3 switches. The first one here is an out switch, which sends a value of 1 out. And then I've got an in switch, and I'll explain how that works. I'll start with the first out switch here. So an out switch, which I did talk about in my previous video, it takes a single input, which is over here, and I'll set it to 1. And it has a channel selector, which can be set manually from the switch, or in this case, it takes its input from the value that controls the display. So this is controlling the channel selector. And the way a switch works is that the channel selector will divide the CV values from 0 to 1 equally between its outputs. And by that I mean, in this case I've got 10 outputs because I want them to correspond to values 0 to 9. And it takes the value of 0 to 1 and divides it by 10 in this case. So that the first channel is selected when the channel select input is between 0 and 0.1 in this particular case. The next one is selected when the input value is between 0.1 and 0.2, etc. If you have fewer channels, if you have 3 channels, it would be channel 1 would be 0 to 33, 0.33, channel 2 would be 0.33 to 0.66, etc. So that's how it works. It splits the CV range from 0 to 1 evenly between the outputs to find out which one is selected. And an out switch, it takes its input, which in this case is always a permanent 1, and sends it to the output that is selected. Okay, so far so good. And this output, so say I take the output on channel, okay, on channel 1 is supposed to be the zeros. So that's when it's between 0 and 1. So I don't show those on my display for the tens digits. So if I go to channel 2 now, that would be the digit 1. And channel 3 will be digits 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if I go to channel 2 now and I go to 2 pages down, you see that it's connected here to this value module. And the output of this value module is connected to the pixels that make up the digit 1. These are lighting up a bit brighter now than the other pixels. I hope you can see that. Yeah, I think you can see that on my on the video. And I do that for all the different values of, so digit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the ones digits are created by this other out switch down here, and it does exactly the same thing. I'll explain the mathematics between getting the ones out in a moment, but because the mechanics of this are exactly the same, each of these correspond to a value from 0 to 9, and they also have their value modules down here that are connected to the pixel display. Okay, so far so good, I think. Now, how do you get a number from 0 to 1 to display as 2 digits? And there might be other ways to do this, but the easiest one, I think, is to use an in switch. Now, what you want to do, say you have a value of 0.15. So the 0.1, the 1 goes to channel 2 here, and it creates a 1 on the screen. And then you want to create the 5. So the way I found out was that when the value is between 0.1 and 0.2, you want to subtract 1 from the value. And when it's between 0.2 and 0.3, you want to subtract 0.2 from the value. So you remove the first digit, basically, and are left with the second digit. And the way to do that is to use an in switch. Now, an in switch, as opposed to an out switch, takes several different value inputs, and then the channel selector selects which of these inputs goes to the output. And the channel selector is selected by exactly the same value as the ones on the other switches now. But the difference is that the inputs are the number, those are the numbers that we want to subtract from the initial number. So if you go to channel 2 here, the value is 0.1, and that's a fixed value that I put in. And that's what I want to subtract to remove the first digit. 0.2 on the second one, 0.3, etc., all the way up to 0.9. And of course, the numbers aren't completely accurate because of the resolution of the values on the Zoia, but it's near enough that it gets quite accurate results. So depending on the first digit, this in switch then creates a number that is 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, etc., which is the one we want to subtract from the main input, and outputs that to a single output. Okay, so far so good, I hope. I hope that's clear, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Now that value is then going in here to a value module, just so I could got it all on one page. I didn't have to make an extra value module, but I like keeping it for neatness. And I want to subtract it, so I need to invert this number. So the output of this value goes into an inverter module, which is here. So it takes the input, which is the number from the in switch, inverts it, creates a negative number. See if we get one here now. Yeah, there was minus 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. Then we have, oh, hang on, yes. And then this goes into a value module, which then is the same as the value that goes into the counter, but minus the first digit. As you can see here, it goes from 0 to 0.9. But see, sometimes it flashes over on minus now. And this has to do with the rounding of the numbers, and of course how the numbers aren't entirely accurate. You can't set it exactly to 0.1, 0.2, etc., or it certainly is more tricky to do so. You could do it, but you would have to go via a note value. So in order to prevent this from causing any problems, I've also included a rectifier module here at the end. So the output here goes into the rectifier. What the rectifier does is it just removes the minus sign. So if it goes down to negative numbers for some reason, which it sometimes does, it makes it a positive number, which won't make a difference really because it's such a small, it only goes slightly below 0, and this will always be a positive number, so it doesn't mess up the system. And now we have the second digit now, and then we need to multiply that by 10. So how do we multiply something by 10 on the Zoia? Well, there might be different ways of doing this. The thing that I found was the easiest was to do a string of value modules. So this is the first value module. That is the base input value between now 0 and 0.1. And it's connected to a second value module, and the connection has a connection strength of 200%, which basically means it multiplies the number by 2. So over here, it's going up to 0.2. And then it goes into a new value module, again, with a connection strength of 200%. Not accurate, though, because, again, the resolution is a bit strange sometimes on the Zoia. But it's close enough. It doesn't have to be accurate for this to work and look really nice. And then finally, there is a connection to a new value module, and that's 250%. So we've got 2 times 2 times 2.5, and that adds up to times 10. So 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2.5 is 10. And that output then is the whole range of CV values from 0 to 1. And that... oh, this one is not in use, so I'll just remove that. And that is the channel select input of the second out switch. So basically now we're given this we've taken the second digit of the initial number, we multiplied it by 10, we removed the first digit, we multiplied by 10, and now that acts as the controller for this switch, and it works exactly the same way then as the first out switch. It divides the 10 outputs evenly between, so it's 0 to 0.1, 0.1 to 0.2, etc. And each of these is then sent to a value module with a value of 1. Oh, I almost patched something up there. Each of these then has a value of 1, which is the input. And that's the one I select because it needs to be, I want it to be on with full strength. And depending on the selector, it gives the output to each of these 10 channels. And they go to these value modules down here. And the first one controls the 0, the 1 digit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then each of these, let's do this one here, which should be the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the value that comes out of channel 4 from the out switch. And the output, which becomes 1 every time that channel is selected, controls the digit 4 here, as you can see. And that is how it works. It's not a very complicated patch, not too hard to wrap your head around, and it doesn't use a lot of processing power either. It's now running at 15.4% CPU, which isn't too bad, which means you can add this in other patches if you've got a bit of extra headroom. As a visualizer of some value, for instance, like an LFO in this case, or anything else, or whatever you like to do with it. So there are lots of possibilities, and only your imagination is the limit. Also the CPU, as I like saying. With the Zoia, it's your imagination and the CPU. Those are the two only limits. Of course, now what I would want to do to tidy this up a little bit, I'll just save this now to make sure everything is fine. I would take the LFO here and I'd move it to this page here. And I would take this value module and move it to this page here. And then I would swap these one step to the left. So I'm going to do that now. Just shifting them all one to the left to make this a little bit tidier. Like so. So now it looks a bit neater when there's a bit more space between the numbers. And of course, when I make the numbers themselves, what I would do is I would move one of these value modules. I would want to have them on the left here as well, because then I can just select the value and just quickly draw out the pixels that it corresponds to, and then I move the value module to the next page when I'm done. So it's quite easy to do, really. Okay, so I'm just going to save that now. And there we have it. That's your counter. You can use it for anything, and it also just looks fun. And what you know, the Zoia can count to 100. Who knew? Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, share, subscribe, all the usual stuff that people do on YouTube, or so I've been told. And also, if you have any questions about this, I think I made it rather clear this time how this works. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I may add this to patch storage at some point. I've not started using patch storage yet, but I do understand that there's quite a bit of a Zoia community there. There's certainly a certain number of patches, and I suppose it makes sense to share some of my patches there as I go along as well. So I will get to that at some point. Right, so I'm sorry, there's no sound, no music in this one, no oscilloscope effect, which I really like using when I can, but it's a fun little kind of patch, and I hope you get some use out of this. And yeah, thanks for watching again, and I'll see you next time with more Zoia videos. Coming up soon, of course, is the one where I will explain logic gates and how to make them on the Zoia, and just a little bit about the basics of them. And yeah, and yes, goodbye for now. I think that's all that's left to say, really. Goodbye. Bye-bye.